in Christian literature.
Right. You talked about a council, and the Council of Nicaea is the only council that people bring up. A lot of black people too. This where Christianity was invented. This where Jesus got his deity. Wow, this where Jesus was invented, and the Bible in general and whole was invented. Like I see you shaking your head. Like this is just. I know to a historian, this is like nonsense. It's foolery, but that's what people say. So can you talk about that the council you just said? I forgot the council that you just said. Can you say it again?
Yeah, I mean, like, so I mean, I say, like, you know, I do both of them. Like, so first of all, okay, like, it's nonsense. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But again, it's like half truths mixed in, because again, like in the 300s, in 325, and just around that whole time period, the Emperor Constantine was basically trying to act like he was like a Christian emperor, or really actually more so some of the Christians in the Roman Empire were trying to treat him that way. And because he was trying to make Rome great again, and he was trying to, you know, come in and pretend like he was like, you know, God's man or whatever. And he did allow Christians to stop being persecuted anymore. But, you know, also that was when Roman Christians started to basically act like Roman Christianity was the only one. And he was saying that he's going to conquer the name of the cross. And after him, especially after Theophilus and going forward, there was many other, you know, emperors that were trying to like basically use Christianity as a tool of oppression. And so that was when, you know, and we already know because the history of this country, there was so-called Christians who were trying to pervert and use Christianity to their own selfish means. And that, yes, that goes back to the Roman emperors. But that's not the beginning of Christianity. That's the beginning of perverted Christianity. But that's not the beginning of Christianity. There was theologians all over the world that already clearly, I mean, first of all, the Bible says Jesus is God, because Jesus himself said in the Gospels before Abraham was I am. That's a very Hebrew Semitic way of saying I'm God, because we already know that I am means I'm God. But also there was Christians all over the world in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century that had clearly said Jesus was God. You read Irenaeus of Lyon, you read Ignatius of Antioch, Tertullian from North Africa in the 200s. You read Justin Martyr, you read Origen and Clement of Alexandria. All of these theologians believe that Jesus was God. And you read Tatian the Syrian, right? See, because it ain't just, you know, these other names that I said are the Greek and Latin theologians, and they believe Jesus was God. But you also got Tatian the Syrian, and you also got the Persian church. People talk about the Council of Nicaea. People don't even realize the Council of Seleucia. The Council of Seleucia was a Persian council. That happened 10 years before the Council of Nicaea. So the Persian Empire had its own church, and they were completely separate from the Roman church. So nobody can sit up in here and say that Constantine invented this whole thing when there was already a church in Persia that already believed that Jesus was God. Armenia was the first Christian nation. Before Constantine even tried to say he was a Christian, King Tiridates III of Armenia embraced Christianity as the national religion of Armenia. And then today, to this day, they're a 99% non-Christian country. And they will tell you, we are the oldest Christian nation on the earth. They embraced Christianity at the time when Emperor Diocletian was murdering Christians in the Roman Empire. And so, again, how are they going to say that, you know, they invented this whole thing when Roman Empire was killing Christians left and right? And at the same time, in India and in Armenia and in Persia, there was already Christians, and in the Roman Empire, too, who believed Jesus was God. So it's nonsense to say that. People all over the world had already believed Jesus was God way before the Council of Nicaea. But again, the half sliver of truth in that is that the Council of Nicaea and also that time period of Constantine and following, that represent the time that the Roman Empire was trying to basically make it seem like Christianity belonged to them and that they were the Christian nation. And that's what white folks have been doing ever since. Like whether it was later on with Charlemagne or later on with the Crusades or with the transatlantic slave trade or, you know, the foundation of the Americas and all that, that's all goes back to that time period. But again, that's not the beginning of the church, as we've already shown. The other thing about that, though, is the Council of Chalcedon. So the Council of Chalcedon was 451. That's another council we don't talk about, because that's another thing people don't want to look at, because that was the moment that the Roman church, as they were trying to, you know, kind of present themselves as like the church in charge and the one that was like, you know, the God's church in the whole world. And that was all of a sudden when like all of a sudden Rome was like the center of the church and all that kind of stuff. That was when in 451 there was a council about talking about Jesus's divinity and his humanity. Now the Roman church had a particular way of talking about it, said he's one person in two natures. Now, that's fine. That's a very Greek kind of Platonic way of dividing up person and nature. But those words in Greek did not necessarily translate into the Christian communities in Egypt or in Syria or in other parts of the world, in Ethiopia. And so they rejected that. And because of that, the Roman church actually persecuted the Ethiopian and the Egyptian and the Syrian and the Arabian churches. So you had white Christians persecuting black and brown Christians from the year 451 for 200 years. Then when the Muslims came in and conquered, the Roman Christians just left them because they were saying, well, y'all ain't really Christians anyway, and so we'll just let the Muslims take over y'all. And then they became double minorities. The Christians in Africa and in the Middle East became double minorities. They were persecuted by Roman Christians and they were persecuted by Muslims. But the importance of the Council of Chalcedon is what that shows us is that there were different styles of Christianity. So people cannot say that the Constantinian or the oppressive or the Roman or European version of Christianity is the only example. But there are still today Christian communities that go back to the beginning of the church. And in the year 451, and to this day, they reject the Roman definition of theology and they have their own theology. Because of that, Roman Catholic and even many Protestants will look down on these churches and say, oh, they ain't really Christians. But what they're doing is they are just regurgitating a perception of these churches based on like 1,500 years now of European projections of heresy. And a lot of times they don't even read these theologians in their own language. They don't even know these names of some of these people we're talking about. People like Georgius of Sagla or Timothy Elarus or Severus of Antioch. They wrote in other languages and they got condemned as heretics without even being able to read what they wrote in their actual language. But these are theologies that were not only different from the Roman or the European Christianity, but they actually resisted it. And they had beef with the European Christianity.